Namaskar. Today is the 23rd of April 2021 and this is episode 148 of Daily Global Insights with Sri and Sri. Here are the main points. Kamala Harris casts a third tie-breaking vote to advance contentious Pentagon pick, Colin Kahl. Senate Republicans called for spending upwards of $568 billion. Markets plummet that Biden wants to raise capital gains tax to as high as 43.4%. Syrian missiles explode near Israeli nuclear reactor. Israel retaliates. Indian exports of agricultural and allied products increased by 18% to 2.74 lakh crores in the period April 20th to February 21. And Sridharji, your initial thoughts.
Good morning to everybody, and I'm sure that you're all going to have a wonderful Friday as we come to the end of the week. As expected, my initial reactions are as expected. Kamala Harris is rolling on. She has now become the indispensable 51st candidate to cast critical vote as she tries to navigate the passage of several policy-related matters to the Democratic Party. It's very unfortunate that the Senate is in that situation. That's my first observation. The second observation is that yesterday we talked about the explosions near the Israeli nuclear reactor. There were some perceptions that it could be, some incidents around. But today we get the confirmation that it was a Syrian missile strike, and obviously it has got consequences, and Israel is responding. This capital gains tax was talked about, exceeding 1 million by Ms. Warren, but obviously, there are going to be several flip-flops by Mr. Biden before it settles down. But the current rate of, 39%, as against the 20% prevailing rate, casts aspersions on what happens to the stock market. Everybody invests in the market because the long-term gains is attractive and beneficial, but not at this kind of tax rate. Those are my initial observations.
And in U.S. news, Senate confirms Vanita Gupta as Associate Attorney General, and Senate passes Bipartisan Asian Hate Crimes Bill. Together, it seems like now the confirmation process is again moving forward. Vanita Gupta was a bit of a controversial choice for some of the comments she made, but looks like another lady senator from the GOP came to her help, sir.
Well, let's start with Colin Kahl. Colin Kahl was controversial. We discussed it about. He was one of the ex-Obama administration. He was in the security. He also advised Colin also advised Obama in the Iran deal, the much contested Iran deal. It's interesting to see that his nomination has got through. Obviously, it went on party lines 50-50. He is now confirmed as the Undersecretary Defense Policy. Now, it's not just the confirmation. It also raises concern. This whole Iran deal itself is being viewed in a very, a suspicious manner, whether the objectives would be accomplished. This nomination it goes a long way with additional set of eyes, again, back in the Biden administration, looking over the deal. Vanita Gupta is another person who has had some very provocative remarks, again, much contested in the Senate, but eventually, the Senate decided to confirm and moves forward. Yes, one more Indian American in the Biden cabinet. As far as the Asian hate crime bill, this is relating to the crimes that is taking place in United States. There's a bipartisan support which says that they condemn and laying out the framework as to the stringency of what can come if this situation continues. So I think everybody supports this Asian hate crimes bill.
I think it was 94-1. And moving on, sir, House Democrats passed DC Statehood bill to make DC the 51st state. How do you think it's going to fare in the Senate?
Well, it's this the House has passed the bill. Then immediately we have had Democratic progressive passing very rhetorical types of comments. They call filibuster as racist. They call filibuster is anti-American. They call it filibuster as anti-progressive, an attempt by vested interests or the GOP, in other words, to stall progress of an elected government. So that all sets you a precursor, and this is not something that was supported by the Republican Party. It'll be interesting to see how the voting occurs and whether it gets nominated or whether it gets approved. It should have a filibuster. It should have the 60 votes because it's a significant decision in terms of District of Columbia being nominated as a state. So, but whether our proverbial logic works or whether they will continue to apply this filibuster and probably bring Kamala Harris, the fourth time to get this done remains to be seen. There's nothing that we can predict, sir, in the Senate. Everything seems to take a topsy-turvy turn, and on one day you expect that there could be some bipartisan, but then the next day you see that that's all cast aside.
And now the Senate Republicans are telling the Democrats to back off controversial court packing. It seems like I've heard this before a few years back.
Well, Democrats strongly feel that the Supreme Court is very much against the present because it is cast and it is set for life. There is heavy what you call conservatives that make up the Supreme Court bench. So they believe that their progressive agenda is at risk with that Supreme Court. So they're trying to exercise their position and add 3 more judges or 4 more judges or 5 more judges, which gives them the majority through a House legislative process, get the votes, take it to the Senate, and again, put subtle type of pressure to see whether they can get it done. Senate has effectively, Lindsey Graham and others, and even some of the we think we talked about this again, Stephen Brewer and so on. Some of the ex-justices who belong to the Democratic Party, even Rehnquist and have made comments that Supreme Court packing is not the right thing, and the prevailing law should prevail. Again, I think the present Democratic setup is in no mood to let down. And again, if you want me to recall, I go back to Mr. Obama's letter to the Georgia Senate elections to the people of Georgia that this is the time, our agenda is at risk. All of you should come and vote so that our agenda is accomplished in this specific term. So they're very clear. They are moving with a maniacal pace, either through executive orders or through this process to get things moving.
House Democrats pass plan to stop travel bans. Is this the ban to some Islamic countries, sir?
I won't use the word Islamic, but countries which have been deemed unsafe and where you are receiving, it could be some of the Latin American countries too. It could be
Is Venezuela also on the list?
I have a feeling, yes, Venezuela is probably
I see.
the list.
I stand corrected. I mean, if it's some countries are banned, let's put it that way.
Yeah. So I think that now what they've done is President as the commander-in-chief exercised the right in consultation with his national security team and even the defense, application of ban to certain countries. Now, what this specific bill states is that not only the president is not allowed, but he must come up and come to the House and get the House approval before the bans are applied. The counter argument to that, which Democrats says, by banning targeted or selected countries, then many people who have relatives, friends, and so on, they're all denied access to see each other, is the case that they make, which seems to precede the security issue, I have a feeling that they will do a compromise if it doesn't get through the Senate. But this is a bill that doesn't need to come to the Senate. It holds, and I'm not sure that this is good for United States. Is one, and mind you, this is on a day when two alleged security terror suspects again waded through the border.
And the Biden administration is also cozying up to a controversial UN agency for Palestinian refugees.
Well, it's called as the United Nations Refugee and Welfare Organization, UNWRA. Historically, this agency has been used for a number of, and specifically the Palestinian refugees in terms of aid and aid distribution. It is alleged and it is believed that they seem more sympathetic, but they're not condemning any of the acts of violence and other things that emanate from the territories. And occasionally they have passed anti-Semitic remarks either, and anti-Israel remarks. For Biden administration to hobnob with such an agency, remember recently United States, we sent $125 million as aid into the territories. No one knows what exactly is the accountability on the outcome of the flow of that specific capital. But this just adds one more issue to a number of other issues that are propping up.
And in other news, US lawmakers back $100 million science plan to compete with China. This $100 million will be directed where, sir?
To various research and scientific activities, basically to encourage all forms of science, including this pandemic and medical and other types of research activities into both government and non-government by way of grants. It helps scientific advancement against potential threats that the nation faces.
And US lawmakers intensify bipartisan effort to counter China. Now, this is something that's happening at so many different levels. Perhaps you can explain it out for us in a little bit time. What exactly are the things that US is mulling over?
US is mulling over on 4 to 5 areas. We already know what they're doing on the defense front, which is around the security in terms of protecting. That's number one. Number two, they also are trying to mitigate any aspects and issues that relates to supply of critical materials, rare earths, we talked about, number two. Number three, that they want to have deterrence around the development of next generational technologies, AI, 5G, and 6G. They are collaborating with Japan and other countries, especially around the 6G and AI capabilities. The manufacturing of the chips, and they are encouraging Taiwan to come in and do that. So these are very specific programs which the Senate and the House wants to support so that it can counter any measures that China takes in terms of throttling the United States issues that are close to United States security, trade, and commerce policies.
And laid off Keystone Pipeline workers blast Biden infrastructure agenda. Sir, before I pass the question over to you, isn't it true that it was under Biden, it was under Obama's watch that Keystone Pipeline was started?
Keystone Pipeline, no, he approved the environmental agency.
He approved it, yeah.
He approved environmental agencies and came and made a case, and he stalled it. It was approved subsequently by President Trump.
Oh, okay. Yeah, please go ahead, sir. So now you have a bunch of people with well-paying jobs out of a job, and shale drilling is considered unsafe. What do they do? What is the future for them?
They all have to go into alternate energy programs. And as Mr. John Kelly put it, a car has a steering and 4 wheels. It doesn't care, what it uses as energy. So therefore, these guys will be retrained and sent into these new energy fuels that are environmentally safe and efficient, such as electric vehicles and so on and so forth. So they are not buying into the argument. He says it's not linear, one to one. We all have educated, trained, and so on in this. The pipeline is a specific business and a specific skill. We get trained as to how these pipes are laid and how the gas flows through these pipes, plus as well as drilling, and all these areas are very specialized skills and special purpose jobs. So when these guys get laid off, which is very highly likely, they have no alternate recourse. So significant number of people in middle America are going to be impacted as a result of this.
And in infrastructure funding news, Senate Republicans have called for a spending of about 568 billion. We will share the details of that in just a short while. Larry Kudlow says that Biden infrastructure plan would kill the economy, and the Republican plan of 568 plus. If you will permit me, I will just put a chart here, sir, and it is in front of me here. And this is essentially the pie chart that says like 299 billion over 5 years spending on roads and bridges, 161 billion on public transit systems. So this is the Republican plan. And what are your thoughts, sir? I mean, where do you think the two will meet?
The Republican plan, if you talk about infrastructure, lays out in clear numbers, which is roads and bridges, which is part of the infrastructure, public transit system, that's subways and so on. That's again a very clear infrastructure necessity in terms of upgrade. Amtrak, which is the interstate, railroad, and that is 20 billion. So definitely, Amtrak requires, if you're traveling between Boston and to Washington D.C., it's very highly used commuting business and commercial commuting, and of course governmental commuting, platform vehicle. And so the story is that that's $20 billion. Then airports need to be upgraded. Some of the airports are new, but many of the airports are old, 44 billion. So when you take a look at that, you are talking about infrastructure for this country, which is everybody believes that it needs to happen. Now, there's also earmarks for 65 billion. That means they don't need to spend all of it, plus or minus, and that's for broadband. Again, this is bipartisan that United States require broadband across the entire United States. So when you take this into the context, these numbers do make sense as an infrastructure. Then what is stuck in this 2.25 trillion of the Biden's plan has got the whole set of tchotchkes, including bailing out the state administrations and sending money overseas, etc. So in terms of the outlay of expenses, it looks logical. The question is funding. This is where the big battle is going to be. How is it going to be funded? Now, Larry Kudlow's point is that when you increase corporate taxes, it reduces the investments that they make, and therefore tax cuts has enabled the boom in the past 4 years and sustained growth coming out of the sustained recovery that happened from 2008 to 2016. So this is where the rubber hits the road. What is going to be the funding plan? There is no clarity as yet whether tax hikes are going to be, corporate tax hike rates are going to hike. But then today we hear another tax hike, which is around the capital gains. So one never knows what it is. But if I have to bet, then knowing what Democrats have done, they're just going to throw the Republican pan into the kitchen sink and then move forward with their 2.25 trillion plan.
After all, they have the casting vote in the Senate.
Correct.
And Devin Nunes' groundbreaking Trump document is back into spotlight. For our viewers' benefit, I think we are talking about this for the first time in our series. Perhaps you can expand on it a little bit and the significance of this, sir.
Well, I think it's very important. If you go back to 2016 elections victory and what preceded the during that particular phase and what followed after. Right through Trump's presidency, there was this issue around illegitimacy and there was Russian interference. So the whole thing, there was a lot of investigations being conducted. Essentially, there are two main issues or two main principles. First, the Devin Nunes document confirmed that the Democratic Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign funded a Kremlin-sourced dossier in 2016 that accused Donald Trump and his allies of various election conspiracy crimes. That's the first theme around this Trump document that Devin Nunes has brought to highlight. The second is that the Democratic finance dossier was used by the FBI to justify 4 wiretappings for lasting more than a year on Trump campaign volunteer Quetta page. The FBI warrant application contained inaccuracies, and that news injected real evidence of partisanship as a motive for the FBI's probe, and that was called as the crossfire hurricane. So this is the central theme of the issues that originated from this specific document. Then, in the subsequent inquiry, when Devin went after Christopher Wray, the FBI director, and FBI director on the issue around using inappropriate evidence and not conceding and colluding and collaborating with the government or the government that was exiting. And Chris Wray's comment was that the evidence was not material. Then the second thing is that Eric Salzwell, who runs who still runs the security or I think it's a security or I don't remember which committee. He runs one specific committee where he has National Intelligence Committee, or he runs the Intelligence Committee, and there was issues whether his interests were compromised with China. And the issue here is Eric Salzwell took copious notes of what has happened. How exactly he's going to again use this, we don't know. So this is why he has brought this document back into spotlight to highlight that the FBI and some of the intelligence agencies seems to be more collusive with the previous administration, which is Obama, Biden, and some of them have tipped into the present regime as well. If you can see Biden administration, many nominees, they are from the old regime.
And in global news, the climate summit begins with Japan and US boosting targets. Initial thoughts, sir, because I think Modi has claimed that he has surpassed his targets.
Japan is 45%, and people believe that that is very, very tall order, and they need some kind of maniacal innovation in the energy side before they can step in. John Kerry and Biden are talking about 52, 53%. Republicans are laughing, and they're basically saying this plays right into the hands of the Chinese. The very fact that Russians and Chinese readily acceded to attend this summit, makes it, they're going to sit in the sidelines and watch as Biden tries to get this agenda going and puts zillions and zillions of capital. As far as Mr. Modi is concerned, India is, starting from a base ground zero situation when you look at China versus United States on the scale of economy. India is well advanced in the solar. They are also looking at alternate fuels as another kind of a vehicle. India has is probably the largest solar energy producer in the world. There's significant amount of capital that is flowing into, and it naturally fits within the DNA and the agenda of Modi. So India will gradually make its way. It probably will meet its goals quite easily relative to either Japan or China or Russia or United States.
And in other news, Biden is expected to recognize massacre of Armenians as genocide. This would probably trouble the Turkish.
Yes, I think that it's like peeling the old history, and he wants to recognize the Armenian thing, the Ottoman Empire, which unleashed the fury as a genocide, and it's you're going to see the repercussions. It's almost like we are going into every old historical issue, which is a contentious issue, we're just stirring the pot and waking up another power to instigate more trouble.
And Republicans unveil a bill supporting sanctions on Iran. Now, the Iran deal is off already. Are these additional sanctions on them?
Well, I think that it's not just the sanctions, but the sanctions are around because they're already 60% enrichment. They have this 25-year oil deal. They have infrastructure deal. Those things are happening with China, the 25-year deal I'm talking about. I will not be surprised if Russia has some deal with Iran, and which also puts India in the hot seat. And India seems to have moved from Iran to Iraq, slowly cutting the supply from Iran. And it's also substituted a considerable amount from between Saudi and Iran with United States. So the sanctions is meant to target people, the regime, and so on. But none of the things that the Chinese have done is going to have any material impact on these sanctions to hold.
And in other news, Syrian missiles explode near Israeli nuclear reactor, and Israel has retaliated for this. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think I'm pleasantly surprised that the Syrians want to dangle with. We need to see whether it's actually Syrians or whether it is, some Iranian rebels or Iraqi rebels. Syria is a hodgepodge and hot pot of nobody knows which part of the territory is controlled by whom. I know that central Damascus and the around the Damascus region is by Bashir Assad's forces. But rest of the region is a lot of hanky-panky stuff. So it's quite bothering that as to that it is very specifically called Syrian. And obviously, Israel doesn't keep quiet. It has retaliated with, I'm sure, disproportionate force.
But usually Israel's intelligence is spot on, isn't it?
Absolutely spot on. We have not heard on on the sources and who the people. But yesterday, when the first news broke out, it was very clear that it was near the nuclear reactor. Explosions were seen. Iranians claimed responsibility for retaliation or revenge against their own attack. Then that thing seems to have backed off a bit on the back of this specific news. More to come.
Yes, and as and when it happens, we will update you. Car bomb kills 4 at Quetta Serena hotel in Pakistan, where the Chinese ambassador was expected to be present. He was saved because he was late by half an hour.
Well, I think that, again, Pakistan, we have no idea what exactly is going on. It's supposed to be a strategic partner of China. The BRI initiative is supposed to be, one of the key pillars of the trade. There was also this Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan deal to plug into that railroad and roadway, into connecting Gadar port, and China to be part of that as part of the BRI efforts. Whether there's a whole set of this, what you call splinter groups and these ethnic groups, and I don't know if it's the word terrorist groups, but there's a whole number of groups, who have challenged the Chinese footprint in Pakistan. Whether they could be the responsible for this is a possibility. And if they had targeted a Chinese ambassador who was to be present in that hotel, 12 people died. 12 people died.
Oh, wow, the headcount has gone up.
Yeah.
Now, we had talked about this yesterday, viewers. China warns of serious consequences as Australia scraps BRI. So, Australia is walking away from this. What do you think China can do?
I think we discussed. I think what we are saying is that this is another, what you call fluster that China is making. For every move that somebody makes, China has to respond. So Australia said it is tearing up the BRI. China is saying you will face consequences as a result of it. What can they do? Effectively cut more, exports or imports. They can cut more imports that they make, or Australia could lose some of the exports going towards China. And Australia also imports. There could be, because Australia imports a lot of stuff from China, and very critical stuffs could be banned. Australia also receives investments into some of the agro and energy sectors that could stop. China is also an investor in the Australian real estate. So some of these programs could stop. But Australia would have studied all of this, and they would not have come to a conclusion as a knee-jerk reaction. They recognize their security and their identity and their integrity as a nation is far more important. So therefore, I think both nations would have done their risk and damage assessment before they went on their respective paths.
And we have said this before, the base in Djibouti that Chinese have. The Chinese aircraft carrier in the Indian Ocean could be a reality, isn't it?
It is. I think that we covered extensively the Djibouti, and we said that they have built a huge infrastructure, and they can come from the other side into Indian Ocean. They don't need to come from the southern side, so they can come from the Djibouti area. So it's just one more endorsement that China has game plan sorted out.
And Sri Lanka detects radioactive material in China-bound ship berthed in Hambantota port. Now, this is again China-related, and I wonder what that ship was carrying.
It's certainly carrying radioactive material. The sensors picked it up. It's Antiguan and Barbuda registered ship sailing from Rotterdam going to China. It declared that it is carrying engineering materials and required berthing at the port. And any ship that carries nuclear materials must get upfront forward clearance. So there's some kind of skirmish contention, but the fact that it has radioactive material coming from Europe is clearly a cause for concern.
Yes, and this is not the last word on it. We'll keep you updated on this. Also, United States airdropped supplies near Senkaku Island in a China-focused drill. Now, you see that the action is heating up on the East China Sea also.
Well, it's very interesting. We talked yesterday that for almost 2 to 3 days, now probably today is the fourth day, that Taiwan doesn't get
We spoke too soon.
Thailand doesn't get featured, so they shifted their attention to US has shifted its attention to Senkaku Island. So this is another practice drill that is going on, probably just telling the Chinese, hey, we are ready to airdrop supplies into Senkaku Island and conduct a evacuation exercise. So therefore, they basically went through the drill and went through the process. It's the first time this has been done, and sending a clear message that the United States is ready to act in those two places.
And we have told you in the past that Russia has amassed 125,000 troops along the Ukrainian border. Now comes news that Russia has withdrawn some of its troops from the border. Is Putin blinking?
Putin is a master strategist, is KGB, ex-KGB. He comes from the security apparatus of Russia. He knows how to play the game. And he's playing the game, which is effectively to state, I am the boss of the Baltic and the Black Sea. and I will do what I want to do, and I will do at a time and place of that I choose. So therefore, you guys can do what you can. You guys can do anything. But remember, you also shut off Kurd Strait. So he was pretty much telling the world that the choices are his, and the actions that flow from it are also his.
And in Indian news, Indian exports of agriculture and allied products has increased by 18% to 2.74 lakh crores in the April 20 to February 21st, 21 period. So it is very impressive, sir, the export number.
Well, I think there's more and more goods are now getting what you call quarantined, curated, treated, preserved, and packaged, and making its way into many parts of the world. It's a reflection. And now they're going to develop the food processing industry as well. And remember, in COVID times, many supply lines were cut, and many people couldn't work. So it is very momentous that India has been able to find markets and also to increase its export of the agro and the allied products, and build a very good exporting business. We in the United States, I live in East Coast. Today we can get fresh roses, fresh garlands, mangoes, which we never used to get from India. All of those things are now available, and almost instantaneously, amazingly well packed, especially the flowers are amazingly well packed, and they remain fresh with a little kind of sprinkle of water. It's very good for India, and very good for many of us who are Indian Americans or Indian ethnic origin. We can still get the supplies as we want, as we desire from India through this process.
And Ola Electric is going to build the world's largest hypercharger network with 1 lakh charging points across 400 cities in India. That's impressive. It's a very big undertaking.
It's a very big undertaking. I think they are in this, the scooters, and I think that they feel that it's important for them to have the charging points around the country so that that it can be used. You can also see that another company is coming up with a collaboration with India. So this whole electric vehicle and the battery technology is really taking off in India. We announced yesterday that Tesla is making arrangements and to manufacture, and also the EV, electronic vehicles, as well as the connection outlets. All augurs well for an economy that is ready to take off.
And what you mentioned, I'll just follow up. Taiwan Gogoro partners with Hero Motor Corporation to bring its electric scooter and battery technology to India. Hero Motor Corporation is one of the most successful two-wheeler manufacturers in India. It's seen growth for many, many years. So this is going to be a very interesting engagement, sir. And I hope that this brings very cost-affordable electric scooters to India.
Well, it also makes the EPA commitments, and makes Mr. Modi's task much easier in terms of meeting his environmental goals.
Yes, indeed. And the fifth batch of Rafale fighter aircraft, about 5, have arrived from France today.
Well, I think these Rafale planes continue to arrive. I think totally it's about 35 is the number, 35 or 35 to 40. These numbers keep, little bit variances and keep changing depending on, how they, prioritize. But it's good news for India. Most of it is on the up northern front, but they are keeping something, I think, for the western front as well as potential deterrence.
And in global COVID update, J&J vaccine is effective even against variants per the latest field trials. Pfizer confirms counterfeit vaccines in Mexico and Poland. Singapore isolates over 1,200 migrant workers over COVID. And India reports its highest day spike with 314,000 new cases and 2,104 deaths. Sir, your global picture on what you think is happening over this second big outbreak of COVID.
What's happening is the variants are continuing to create a challenge, especially if you're not vaccinated. United States, Israel, and some of like UK are some of the countries are well on their way with 50% to 100% of the people vaccinated. So where you have had these dual vaccines and the protocols in place, you are beginning to see the downward scale in the active COVID cases, where there is the main issue around the rest of the world. If you take outside of United States, all around the place, including Europe, is the supply of vaccines. Most of the raw material seems to be in United States, yes, in Europe as well. So they are asking United States to open up the supplies. So that's number two. Number three is some vaccines, for example, Moderna and at least Pfizer, seems to be able to fight off the variants. I'm not sure whether some of the other vaccines, like Sputnik or Sinopharm, whether they can deal with the variants. So this is used in quite a few other countries. The good news for India is the Covaxin, which is we covered this yesterday, which is domestically manufactured, can even deal with the double mutant variants. So these are the three main challenges. One is people need to be vaccinated, and many countries don't have the vaccines to vaccinate its population. Second, the ban of exports is restricting the supply in terms of the expansion of manufacturing. Number three is the continued evolution of the variants is bringing about the deacceleration, but it's not stalling the advancement of the COVID in the world.
And in markets news, America's reopening as jobless claims drop to 547,000. Powell pledges Fed will not allow substantial overshoot of inflation. And today the markets plummet because Biden wants to raise capital gains tax to as high as 43.4%. And Biden's aggressive emission goals will also impact economy. So all these things put together, the Dow has tanked more than 300 points, at one point dropping over 420 points. S&P has also given up its earlier gains and it also closed about 0.9% lower. Do you think it will again bounce back? Because we've been having this yo-yo in the market.
I just want to wrap up India. India's rising cases is a big concern. I'm told that the oxygen supply is inadequate. This is as it relates to COVID. There's different sets of data, but the data is there's only one. I hope India addresses the COVID situation, because this number raising to 315,000. Yesterday it was 200,000, or a couple of days ago it was 200. These are astronomical numbers in terms of the rising number of cases. So now transitioning to markets, this 43.4% came up, as a result of the capital gains. Capital gains today is 20%. Capital gains has a direct correlation to the markets, because you have long-term gains and short-term gains. With short-term gains, it is 43%. Is long-term gains 43%? No. Long-term gains is also going to be 43.4%. The short-term gains will be treated as ordinary income, the taxed at ordinary income. So the question, therefore, is, and they have kept a 1 million threshold, and those who earn more than 1 million, you have 43.4% on the realized gains on the capital gains. Now, this implies that the markets are saying there's going to be flight of capital from the markets. That's a sentiment and emotional reaction. Eventually, the markets will settle down, but this tax issue will be addressed through discussions with Biden. He may budge. The question is, he has to find somewhere to fund his astronomical infrastructure budget and other climate budget that he also has in mind. Remember, we talked about yesterday $1 trillion child welfare budget that he needs to fund, and $1 trillion. And he has, there is no, how this is going to be funded remains a contentious issue. He seems to kind of grapple from one to the other. So, in my view, the markets will continue to rise on earnings. Will have gyrations when you have adverse news like this. But in the medium to longer term, the market movements will be determined what happens to the tax structure in the United States.
And as a result of this, possibly Bitcoin has down to 52,359, and Coinbase is at $290.52, and the Dow is at 33,815, and everything, of course, I told you, like everybody is now lower. And with that, sir, it brings us to a close on today's episode of Daily Global Insights. Have a great weekend. Namaskar. And Sridharji, if you would like to do something in the summary, please go ahead, sir.
I think there's a lot going on in the United States. There's a lot going on around the world, especially now it is everywhere. Europe, Middle East, South China Sea, Southeast Asia, ASEAN. We don't even have time to cover Myanmar and the issues around Myanmar. There's a lot going on the COVID side. There's a ban. There is a complete ban planned in Tokyo, the Osaka region. So there is this COVID threat looming on a day-to-day basis. So the world is grappling with a number of issues. Now, one of the questions that I ask is COVID and recovery and reopening of the economy the number one priority of the world, or is dealing climate and climate accord the priority of the world? I really have a problem that they should be discussing COVID at this summit that Mr. Biden is presiding over, rather than when you have all the world leaders. I think 40 countries, the leaders are attending this, and they got their priorities badly screwed up.
Thank you for that input, sir, and have a great weekend, viewers. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel, and also please join our membership and consider donating to our cause. Namaskar.
Namaskar, and thank you so much. Have a wonderful Friday and have a great weekend.